Hey guys, Ladder here, and I finally got around to doing a video that I've been meaning to post for a while now. So today we are looking at the top 5 what-ifs in Star Wars history, basically the top 5 alternate timelines. And the rules for this one are going to be pretty loose because we're working with, I guess, a limited amount of material compared to my usual videos, but there are two main rules that I'm going to enforce pretty strictly. The first is that everything on this list has to be produced in some official capacity, so no fan fiction, nothing like that, only, actually licensed Star Wars stuff. And non-canon Star Wars material is basically referred to as Star Wars Infinities material. And you shouldn't get that confused with the Star Wars Infinities comic book, because that's something completely different. My second rule is that each story here has to actually be a deviation from the standard Star Wars timeline. So, for example, Skippy the Jedi droid doesn't really change anything in A New Hope, so we're not going to include it. And I guess I actually have a third rule too, and that's just to keep things interesting. So I'm only going to draw from one story from a certain type of media. So only one story can come from Star Wars Force Unleashed 1 or 2, only one from the Star Wars Infinities comic book line, and because if we didn't, it would just be, 3 stories from Star Wars Infinities and 2 from The Force Unleashed, and that wouldn't be very interesting. So grab on your hat to get ready, because things are about to get weird. Let's get right into the list. So number 5 on the list is Into the Great Unknown, and this features one of our favorite characters, Han Solo. Basically, after being chased by the Imperial fleet, Han Solo makes a blind hyperspace jump and ends up in our galaxy, and actually in our solar system, and that's right, he ends up in Earth's solar system. So he eventually lands on Earth, although of course he doesn't know that it's Earth. Oh, and by the way, of course, he's got Chewie along with him. And eventually he's attacked by some native humans. Chewie manages to survive, but Han Solo unfortunately is killed by some bows and arrows. However, over 100 years later, Indiana Jones, that's right, Indiana Jones, a character also played by Harrison Ford, comes across Han Solo's dead body inside of the Millennium Falcon while doing one of his archaeology expeditions. Oh yes, and by the way, this story also features Shorty, who I know many Indiana Jones fans like myself love. And I mean, that's pretty much all there is to it. It's a really short story, but it's kind of fun to see a Star Wars character actually on Earth, because from my knowledge, besides for the ride at Disney World, this is pretty much the only Star Wars story that takes place on Earth. And of course, it's also kind of fun to see Dr. Jones and Mr. Solo both exist in the same story universe. Number 4 is Star Wars Chess, and I will admit, this one is kind of pushing it a little bit. Star Wars Chess was a 1993 game released for the PC, and as the name would suggest, it was Star Wars branded. And the only reason that this game really gets a spot on this list is because of the character deaths. Basically, there's a ton of scenes in here where you have, AT-ST versus Chewbacca, or Yoda versus the Emperor. Basically, there's animations for the different chess moves. And again, I know I'm stretching this a little bit because it's not really a different story within the Star Wars universe, but you can kind of, imagine the moves having a story behind them. But really, this just makes the list because of the surprisingly violent deaths in it, and because it's a lot of fun to watch. Number 3 on our list is the alternate ending for the Revenge of the Sith video game. So the entire game basically plays out in the same way that Revenge of the Sith does. However, there is an alternate ending where, as Anakin, you can defeat Obi Wan at the duel on Mustafar. And of course, that means that Anakin isn't completely disfigured, he doesn't lose his limbs, he's no worse for wear after the battle. However, Palpatine still comes to greet him on the planet, because if you remember in Revenge of the Sith, he senses that his new Padawan, or his new apprentice, is in danger, so he comes anyways. However, the fully healthy and now fully dark side Anakin, after killing Obi-Wan and kicking him down into the lava pit, actually kills the Emperor and assumes full control over the Galactic Empire. And I really like this one, actually, because it's within the realm of possibility, but has really far-reaching effects, because not only now is Anakin not crippled, he's completely healthy, he doesn't need the suit, but now he has full control of the Empire to do with as he will. Presumably Padme is still lost, so I wonder what kind of ruler Anakin would be and what levels of force power he would actually reach now that he hasn't lost, full control of his physical body. Number 2 on our list for the greatest what ifs in Star Wars history is the Force Unleashed 2 Endor DLC. And this basically has one of the Starkiller clones from the Force Unleashed series going on Endor during the events of Episode 6 and just wreaking total havoc. So first he takes on Chewie and Han, and it's really kind of sad because he easily pretty much beats Chewie, and then Han accidentally kills Chewie when he's trying to shoot Starkiller, and it's really quite sad, obviously. Then he moves on and kills Solo quite easily as well. And they were just outside the shield generator, so he goes on to the inside and kills all the rebels in there, so they aren't able to blow it up as they do in the movie. And eventually he runs into Princess Leia. And earlier in the storyline, in another piece of DLC for The Force Unleashed 1, Starkiller actually turned Luke to the dark side, and everyone thought that he was dead, so Leia has actually been training this whole time as a Jedi, because you remember she was the other Skywalker and the other hope for the galaxy against the Empire, so she's been training as a Jedi Knight, and she's actually pretty powerful, probably more so than Luke. She's got very considerable lightsaber dueling abilities, and she's really strong with the Force, although in the end, she nonetheless falls to Starkiller. Also in the storyline is the idea that Vader himself is trying to overthrow the Emperor and, assume role as the big honcho in the galaxy, and he's using Starkiller as his weapon, and the Emperor doesn't know about it. But after the events of Endor, the Emperor does find out about it, and he kills Darth Vader with Force lightning, and then sends his forces to the planetary moon to kill him, although we don't actually find out what happens there. Although the Starkiller clone is ridiculously overpowered, so he's probably fine. So we're finally here. The number 1 greatest what-if/alternate history in the Star Wars universe. And appropriately, this comes from the Infinities comic line. And just before I get to this, I'm going to do a little bit of self-promotion and say, if you guys don't already, please join our Discord server that we have going. I'm going to put a link down in the comments because it's a ton of fun. We've got Star Wars conversations going pretty much 24/7. And also give me a follow on Twitter so you can see when my new videos are coming out. And during the work week when I can't post a video every day, I still put some Star Wars stuff out there into the world. Anyway, I'm sorry, enough of that. So more specifically, the number 1 greatest what if comes from Star Wars Infinity's A New Hope. So the whole idea of this is when Luke fired off his proton torpedo, he didn't actually destroy the Death Star because there was a malfunction. Instead, he just kind of powered down the super laser. So most of the rebel forces are destroyed. Some escape, but are quickly captured, and that's actually the case for Princess Leia. She's captured and she's taken to Coruscant as Darth Vader's prisoner. And while there, basically, Darth Vader is training her in the dark side. Luke and Han are pretty much the only rebel forces left from the attack on the Death Star, and they're basically like, what do we do now? Because there's no one left. And luckily for them, Obi Wan Kenobi appears and tells Luke, just like he does in Empire Strikes Back, to go to Dagobah and to train under the tutelage of Master Yoda. And Luke does. Han stays for a while, but he goes off and does his own thing. Luke trains actually for 5 whole years. Interestingly, Luke still goes into the Force Cave at one point, but instead of seeing his own head under Darth Vader's mask, he sees the face of Princess Leia. He would later go into the cave a second time, and he succeeds this time because he's got no fear, and he gains a greater connection to the Force. The whole crew, which is now Yoda, Han Solo, and Chewie have returned, and Luke now set off towards Coruscant, where the Death Star, which, funny enough, has been named the Justice Star, is orbiting, and Yoda basically mind tricks Tarkin into destroying the very, very large fleet that the Empire had stationed over Coruscant, and this is basically multiple Star Destroyers and multiple Super Star Destroyers. Luke confronts Leia, and the both, during their duel, realizes that they're twins, and Leia is redeemed. The Emperor attacks the two twins, kind of like he does in Return of the Jedi after Luke basically refuses to fight Darth Vader, but also similarly, they are saved by Darth Vader, who sacrifices himself. Yoda also crashes the Justice Star into Coruscant, killing himself and actually killing R2-D2, although he gets a new body later, along with Vader and the Emperor. And the story basically ends with the New Republic being formed, and with Yoda, Obi Wan, and Anakin looking on happily, which is obviously very similar to the events of Return of the Jedi. And I really like this one because it's interesting, and it shows that, you know, even if they had failed at the Battle of Yavin, if the rebels had failed at the Battle of Yavin, they still could have pulled it out, although, you know, Luke would have had to really put the effort into training instead of, you know, staying on Dagobah for only a few months. He would have had to be there for years. I also like how it explores Leia's Force sensitivity, because that's something that's often ignored in Star Wars literature. And I mean, it's also nice to have Tarkin around for a bit longer and, you know, have him in an even higher rank and position. Anyways, guys, that's my list of the top 5 greatest what if or alternate timeline stories in the Star Wars universe. If you disagree, let me know in the comments, but keep in mind that I could have chosen other series from the Star Wars, other stories from the Star Wars Infinities or Force Unleashed works, but I chose to basically limit it to just one. Anyways, guys, I look forward to talking to you in the comments, and I'll see you next time. I love you very much. May the Force be with you.